first real gun. And I was so anxious to get it. It was when I turned 18, is when they just changed the legal age from 21 to 18. And so as soon as I turned 18, I went out and bought a Colt 45 government model, and 45's been my gun ever since. As soon as I got out of high school, I just devoted all my time into the photography studio, and of course more guns, because the photography studio gave me the income to be able to continue what I really love, which was reloading and shooting and buying a gun. So it was all about firearms, always.
How many times in history has one man's vision changed the course of warfare? As short as that list may be, there is no more unlikely story than Ronnie Barrett, a photographer with no background in building firearms, who dreamed of a shoulder-fired rifle that could handle the awesome .50 caliber Browning machine gun cartridge. The Barrett M82 semi-auto .50 caliber BMG rifle did indeed change the battlefield, but its birth was anything but easy.
Since my very earliest memories, I remember my father drawing on a small fold-out drawing table in our family den. I knew from before I could speak, he was very creative, and he had a gift and he had a drive. I joke sometimes that I was raised by the gun industry. No, it's our blood.
It's bred into us, I think. It's the one gift we have is with guns and gun design and just mechanical mechanisms, and we just love it. And it's obviously in the genes, because my little boy, I've got a son now, and he's already, you know, into the little cars and things, and nobody ever taught him these things. It's just what Barretts do.
This type of hobby or interest is about like any other. If you're collecting stamps, you always want the next rarest stamp, the biggest stamp, the most expensive stamp. If you're fishing, you want a better bass boat or something. Well, same as in the firearms business, it's no real different. You start out with the guns you can afford, then you get some guns that you can appreciate, then you might get some luxury type guns. It just keeps going. Well, what's at the top of the list? Top of the list is that big .50 caliber Browning machine gun cartridge.
In the early 1980s, Ronnie Barrett was a successful professional photographer in Nashville, about as far from an arms designer as could be imagined. One of his award-winning pictures was of a gunboat moored near Nashville. That boat had 2 Ma Deuces mounted, and the idea of a rifle utilizing the .50 caliber BMG cartridge captured Barrett's imagination.
I was thinking of an idea of trying to make something for myself to be able to enjoy the .50 caliber with. And so as we had a little lull in the photography, I said, you know, I've got this idea of making a T-bolt where I was going to pull it back, or basically a fancy bolt action .50 cal rifle. I said, if I designed that and made one, would you guys be interested in making any for sale, and maybe we can make some money on it? Was a grown man tell a 28-year-old kid, you know. So he said, sure, kid, yeah, we'll do that. So I was excited.
The idea of a man-carried weapon powerful enough to take on the new world of armor came from the First Great War. The Germans, faced with the British Mark IV tanks, turned to the famed Mauser company to create the first anti-tank rifle, the Mauser 1918 T. Gewehr.
The Germans came up with in 1917 to start with. You know, they couldn't make tanks as fast as the British did.
They needed something bigger than 8mm in terms of a cartridge, so they go to 13mm. Now I got a cartridge, what do I do for a gun? Well, we'll just take a standard 98 Mauser and we'll make it bigger. And so they did, single shot only, and it takes 2 men, a 2-man crew, to make it work because it's so big and heavy.
The Mauser was not the only large caliber gun in the game. America's resident arms genius, John M. Browning, had been designing machine guns since 1895, and by the end of World War I, he was experimenting with his own .50 caliber cartridge, a scaled-up version of the venerable .30-06.
It is the largest cartridge that you can fire as small arms before you get into the cannon class. But there was nothing to play with that easily. That big Browning M2 machine gun with a 80-something pound firearm sitting on a 40-pound tripod, and it just ate up all the excess money you have laying around the house.
The Browning M1921 50 caliber machine gun and its descendant, the M2, or more commonly the Ma Deuce, was more than 80 pounds of massive firepower, one of the most devastating battlefield weapons ever made, but it was hardly man-portable. The next step took a unique vision. In a time of think tanks and corporate development in firearms, Ronnie Barrett managed to produce the big boy of the battlefield all by himself, the M82A1 50 caliber rifle.
Ronnie Barrett was a guy that had a dream, and you know, against the odds, he decided that he was going to make something happen.
Here you're taking a cartridge John Browning was using to on machine guns and taking that outside of its original role and putting it as a long-range anti-materiel sniper rifle. It's brilliant.
I had a lot of learning curve, you know. I wish I'd paid a little bit better attention in that drafting class in school, but had to go back and learn, you know, get me a set of calipers and learn all of the stuff, and which I did in about 2 or so days. You know, it's like when I want to learn something, I can learn it real fast.
My dad was drawing it up when a little bit after I was born, it was 1982, hence Model 82 A1 is when he started drawing it. I was born in 81. I guess he had 2 babies that year, but I'm the prettier one, right?
Barrett sketched the first version of the rifle that would bear his name full-sized on his kitchen table, using the only sophisticated engineering tool available to him, a ruler.
You know, being an artist and a photographer, I just viewed, you know, everything in a 3-dimensional and sketched it out the way it would be. And my dad was a cabinet maker, and I grew up in the cabinet shop, and everything was an inch, inch and quarter, inch and 3/8, and carried it around to different machine shops, which they just died laughing.
His first visit to a machine shop was nothing short of a disaster. If the idea was any good, he was told, someone smarter than Ronnie Barrett would have already designed and built it.
I found a guy that was a friend of my father-in-law's. He had a mill and a lathe and a little grinder and one little 4x8 table in the middle. It took me about 2 months to draw it up. And so, you know, I started at the end of February, going up to his place, and we would sit there. I'd get off work at the photography studio, close the doors, and if I could get him from 6:30 till 1 in the morning, you know, if I could keep him alive with interesting tales and winning those hearts and mind, you know, I'd say, oh, let's go another 30 minutes. And in 4 months, we had the first shooting gun.
Nobody had any idea how the big 50 caliber would act in a lighter rifle. So just to be safe, when it came time to fire the first prototype, Barrett anchored the gun to the ground and pulled the trigger with a string.
I could get it to work about 2 shots or 3 shots. I was having trouble with it opening. And the only thing I had for a high-speed camera was just a regular VHS camcorder. So we would go out and videotape the thing. And I got a few videos of it firing a few times, so I put together a little loop where we doctored it up, which showed that thing shooting the entire 5-round magazine. I feel bad about that, but you know, I took it over to Pony, and I said, "Well, here's the gun," and he could see it shooting. He said, "Well, it's big and it's ugly, but that sucker shoots."
Ronnie Barrett continued to refine his creation, and orders began trickling in, enough to keep him and his rifle alive, barely.
I advertised it for $2,300. So I borrowed 30, started 30 guns. You know, people actually gave me a deposit. And man, I sold all 30 of them real quick. Those guns cost me $8,000 a piece to build. So, you know, the bank wasn't real happy. So I raised the price to $3,700 and lit back in with all the new knowledge that I had, they let me borrow another 30, and all my bills had yet to even come in while I was doing all this. So they let me borrow a little bit more money, and I made another batch of 30 and sold all of those very quickly too. Those guns only cost me $6,000 a piece. I did that until it went to about $1.5 million in debt, and I went back and eventually, you know, got the price of the gun up, got the cost of the gun down, and started at least holding on. I was glad I was a hometown boy, because that's all it was. People just said, well, I know Ronnie, and I think he's going to be okay, and his dad was all right, and so he's probably good for it, but, you know, so here we were.
When we come back, the United States gears up for a different kind of war, and Ronnie Barrett has the perfect tool for the new battlefield. With Desert Shield and Desert Storm, America went to war in the Middle East and faced the problems of fighting over vast expanses of desert. The military quickly needed a rifle with the capability and power to reach out and destroy trucks, aircraft on the ground, and other materials. Ronnie Barrett was there with his M82A1 semi-auto rifle.
The Army, of course, noticed it. The EOD people were watching after it. The Marine Corps, somehow or another, acquired one. While this is going on, we're building some. Out of nowhere came an order from the Swedish government in 1989 for 100 rifles for EOD work. And that was a good door in.
The way the United States military has worked things is designed by committee. And of course, as we all know, a camel is a horse designed by a committee.
I was told by a big corporation one day at a little gathering we were at, they said, Ronnie, what are you doing? You're never going to sell this. First, you've got to have, you know, like a battlefield deficiency. Then you're going to have a requirements document. And without any of these things, you know, they're never going to be able to purchase this gun. You know, I said, well, you know, it seems like if I put together a good product there and the men like it, maybe they'll, you know, they'll talk it up and somebody will buy it. They said, well, that's just not the way it works. But that's exactly the way it worked.
At 7 o'clock tonight, as you all know by now, Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Thursday morning in the Gulf, the armed forces of the United States began an operation at the direction of the President to force Saddam Hussein to withdraw his troops from Kuwait and to end his occupation of that country.
Desert Storm broke out. Everybody that was in charge of weapons had been well associated and been well trained on my rifle very unofficially. So when the fit hit the shan, they all picked up the phone and said, we need these 50 caliber rifles. We are going to the deserts where long range is going to be the name of the game. And so they all knew what to do. The Marine Corps was the first to come up with their approvals could go through the commandant, and so other people would transfer their money over to the Marine Corps and have the Marine Corps purchase the weapons for them and gave them to the Special Forces and to the Army EODs and the Air Force. And so we got in on an emergency basis because it was just the right gun at the right time in the right place.
It was adopted by the Army as the M107, and then a later version came out as the 82A1A to fire the Raufoss round, and that's the round from heaven in the global war on terror.
The Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle is really procured as an anti-material weapon. If you read the requirements documentation, and the ammunition is a standard 50 caliber round, and there's some specialized armor-piercing rounds and incendiary rounds that are used, and so it's designed to be used as an anti-material weapon, and that greatly enhanced the capability of the forces that have adopted that weapon.
John Weiler, who was 82nd Airborne sniper with the Barrett, he had the longest recorded one-shot kill with a Barrett. I want to say it was close to 2,000 or 2,500 yards. I mean, that's phenomenal.
I think I've heard every squirrel gun joke that you could ever put together, you know, and each time you hear it, you got to laugh again, you know. Give the idea to a good soldier, and he'll figure out what to do with it. And so that's what we've had happen. And slowly now, I don't hear any of those jokes anymore.
The Barrett rifle has gone from a kitchen table in Tennessee to the far-flung battlefields of the world. But Ronnie Barrett and his family business still have loftier goals to achieve.
Other countries started to fall in. They had been seeing what the Sweden had done, what Norway had done, what the U.S. had done. We've got 3 different model 50 cals, and every one of them is in use in some government somewhere. So it's a worldwide game. The rifle that we build today is pretty doggone close to the original prototype. In fact, I can still even take parts from the new guns and put them in an old gun. All those beautiful ads you see in magazines with the beautiful photography and the words and our logo, our current logo, was Angela's. And so the face of Barrett, what you see, is Angela Barrett.
Right now at Barrett, I'm handling the marketing and the U.S. commercial sales. So the distribution to the market, pricing, evaluating the market, where should we go next. But it's all a collaboration really with a lot of other talented people here, and people that are literally, they're our customers.
Chris and I have become quite a design team when we get time to sit down together. We did a .338 semi-automatic rifle in '98 that was a real unique and very different design.
The MRAD is a very interesting gun. It also is a very unique departure from the current state of the art. And that gun kind of derived from the Model 98B. That gun got super tuned into the MRAD, and that is our current state-of-the-art, game-changing long-range rifle system.
It all comes from Ronnie because of his drive to make a good quality product for a good price and you know, help the firearms industry move on to the next level, if you will. And I think he's got a few other things up his sleeve yet, so you know, you haven't seen the last of Ronnie Barrett yet.
It has just been a wild ride full of very colorful characters, and it's been the greatest thing I've ever done.
Like Thompson or Gatling, the single word Barrett conjures up the image not of the man, but of the gun. Not only the U.S. military, but some 63 allied foreign militaries have adopted the Big Barrett, a testament to not only the rifle's quality, but to one man's vision.